We're here. We're live. Episode 26 of Lifts, post-FIBO. We're just still recovering from our jet lag. Well, I am, Mo. I don't know how you feel.
I'm feeling a bit better. I mean, I actually napped last Saturday because I came back from FIBO. I know you went after FIBO to Arizona. We can talk about that a bit. I came back to DC, quickly turned around, went up to New York. So I felt like I was in this constant state of jet lag for about 2 weeks. I actually napped on Saturday, Matthew, which is something I don't do. I don't think many of us in this call actually naps. We should probably nap more because after the nap, I just felt amazing.
Yes.
That's what I needed. And then Sunday, I was back to it.
Brian, have you done FIBO before?
I have not done FIBO, and I will tell you that this year, the amount of content that I saw via LinkedIn, via Instagram, gave me incredible FOMO. And so I think I'm going to have to make sure I make it next year.
Yeah. Well, Mo, why don't we interview Brian, and then we can talk about some of the interesting stuff that we saw whilst we were there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, one, Bryan Myers is a friend, an industry colleague, local Arlington, well, Northern Virginia resident. I'm in Arlington. You're based in Arlington, but you live in Fairfax, right?
Yep.
So I want to introduce you to the Lyft's audience. Bryan is the president and chief executive officer at solidcore. He's also an active solidcore coach. I still have to take one of his classes, but solidcore, for those of you who haven't done it, is an incredible workout, and I will promise you it is much more difficult than what it seems. But this is not your first time in the wellness industry. Prior to joining solidcore in 2018, Bryan was also a member of the leadership team at Sweet Green, helping grow the company from just a regional chain of 20 restaurants to almost 100 locations nationally. And he's now doing the same over at solidcore. In 2023, Bryan was recognized as the EY Entrepreneur of Mid-Atlantic. He's also been nominated for several awards. He was also featured on March's 2023 issue of Essence magazine. I can go on, but this is a 30-minute podcast. You're highly accomplished. We're so excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mo, for that incredible introduction. You're sounding like my mom the way you're bragging about me, but I appreciate
Well, I'm
it.
proud. I'm proud to know you now that you're in DC, and we're both growing our respective DC brands together.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here and excited to be leading the charge here at solidcore and looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, FIBO was a lot, and I think I know you're not international yet,
Yet.
but FIBO, one of the biggest takeaways, and I've only been going for the last couple of years. I started going about 2 years before the pandemic. Matthew, I think you've been going for about a couple of decades to FIBO at this point, has grown to be very much of an international event. It started, I think, even in 2018, which was my first year, being very Europe centric. In fact, we made the trip over as we were exploring our growth options for Europe predominantly. And then we started getting more of the Asian brands and vendors and partners coming to FIBO. This year felt truly international. In fact, I saw, Brian, so many friends that we know here from the US make the trip over. And just everything from the event execution to the thought leadership at EHFF to the evening events was just fantastic. And you were just kind of talking about the content, but if you're going to go next year, we'll definitely be hanging out.
1000%. Yeah, I think that's the thing that was probably a misconception on my part, which was, hey, we're not an international brand. We're not, opening in Europe just yet. So does it really make sense for me to go? And I think one of the things that became clear as I was absorbing all of the content coming out of FIBO was no, there's actually still a lot of amazing thought leadership, a lot of incredible executives and folks in the fitness industry, all parts of the wellness industry really, that are touching that event that would be really powerful to build relationships with. So like I said, looking forward to not having FOMO the next time because I won't be missing out.
I think it was quite good because I don't know how many years they've done this, but certainly the last 3 or 4 years I've been, they have Europe Active hosts an event prior to the trade show, and it's a full day. There's a number of speakers, and I guess CEOs of operators and manufacturers come together, and along with some great research where they talk about what's going on in the European region. Mo and I were quite fortunate to have a series of interviews, which we will be releasing next week or probably last week by the time you hear this podcast. So that's pretty unique. And then at the end of the first day, there's a get together where you get a chance to do some really, really good networking. And then there's the show, the trade show side of things. For someone who's done trade shows for a couple of decades or longer, it really is, I think, one of the best trade shows for the fitness industry, because you really see everything, whether those things are right for where you are in the market. It just brings together so many different people, so many different ideas. And I would say, if for any fitness enthusiast, it's got to be the equivalent of going to Disneyland, I think.
Yes, even just sampling the protein bars, basically like during FIBO. I don't know if I should be admitting this, but it's a bit like Costco, Brian, where if you're hungry for a snack and you don't have time, as you're walking from meeting to meeting, you just grab a little snack here, a little drink over here, a little pre-workout over here, and you're good. So,
Yeah.
and no, but it truly, to have over 1,000 vendors. I don't know how many participants. The Uber drivers were telling me that it's
I
the
think there's
biggest
about
event.
100,000 they
Wow.
said around
Okay.
about, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and we got to meet a lot of people. We actually had really productive meetings, very productive meetings. And in fact, one of them, which we want to get into here in a minute, was with the founder of HYROX. And we
Mhm.
haven't had Christian on the podcast. We wanted to, we couldn't get things lined up, but he's really built a wonderful brand that has grown over the last several years with some key sponsorships, some key activations. But Matthew, do you want to kick us off on our first story of the week?
Yeah. Well, first, just to set the scene, Mo and I, it was at the end of the event on the Thursday, and we struggled to find each other. We were searching for about 15 minutes because it's such a huge venue, but we managed to find out where each of us was. And we went downstairs into this huge hall, which kind of covered around, my guess is around about half of the venue, and it was set up ready for the HYROX event at the weekend. It was vast, like you couldn't
It was
round
over
it.
200,000 square feet.
Right. So it was very impressive. Apparently, it was bigger than it was last year, and his events continue to grow. And from memory, I think he said he was expecting around about 6,000 people. Was that right? Was that how you understood it, Mo?
7,000. I think he sold out at 7,000.
Okay, right. So sold out event, and we got to hear a little bit about what they were doing, and a lot of it links into this article, and I'll read it for you. This is an article from Endurance Biz, and it says that HYROX, positioned as complete performance and training ecosystem. Indoor fitness racing series HYROX has launched HYROX365, which is billed as a comprehensive new ecosystem, evolving its capacity to provide training, education, and equipment for gym owners, coaches, and service providers. We got a chance to ask Christian a little bit about this, but their goal is to, from what I understand, license their content material. So you can go to any health club that's interested in getting involved in this, and you can train to be able to be ready for a competition. They were presenting one of these areas there, which I didn't actually get to see, and they were also presenting their partnership with Centered, who have created a number of sleds and sandbags and kettlebells and tools that can be used to train in a traditional health.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because I think when you look at the relationships that they have with gyms, a lot of fitness brands, you could look at Peloton, you could look at Spartan. I think initially you had events, you had the at-home brands, but they were really missing that relationship with the gym. And I think Christian here, smartly so, is seeing that in order for the brand to have sustained growth, he's got to create a holistic ecosystem, and he's got to partner with gyms, right? Gyms are your friend. There's someone you should work with. There's someone that is complementary to his core offering. So HYROX 365 is really meant to be a training program for gyms to use for group training classes specifically, so that they could kind of have a mark on the calendar and say, okay, you're 12 weeks out from HYROX event. I'm going to train you to be better. I think, Brian, you come from the boutique side, obviously. How important do you think that relationship with traditional gyms are?
I think it's incredibly important. And I've actually had the opportunity to have a front row seat to this, kind of stepping aside from my sort of day-to-day role as the CEO of solidcore. I have a number of friends, including a very close friend of mine, who are recently obsessive over Hyrox. And so for those of you who don't know, Hyrox did, I think, its first competition in the DC metro area. I think it was
Yes.
the first, not that long ago. And what I saw was a friend of mine who has always been into health and wellness, particularly into boutique fitness, decide to sign up almost on a whim with a friend and go out and do this thing. And I think for him, one, Hyrox generally all of a sudden created purpose behind why he was working out, why he was physically fit, and allowed him to see in a very tactical way the strength that he had gained doing workouts like solid core and others around the city, how that actually translated into this physical competition. But coming out of it, what was actually most fascinating was all of a sudden he was like, oh, no, 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 I want to be even better at this the next time around. And so I don't know, Mo, you may know him, but Dave Magida, who's actually quoted in that
I know Dave.
article,
Well,
yeah,
yes.
I didn't realize that he was working officially with Hyrox, but Dave, through his, local studios here at Elevate Interval Fitness, started to develop this programming for those who wanted to improve their performance at Hyrox. And my friend has been all over those classes. And so I think it's such a smart way to take that competitive spirit and, like you said, kind of extend and elongate the life of that so that someone is feeling like they're working towards something. And then all of a sudden, you don't have just like these big tentpole moments that people look forward to, but that you actually have a sort of ongoing drumbeat even throughout the year between those moments. So I think it's incredibly smart on behalf of the High Rocks team.
That's exactly what Christian was saying, right? He wanted to create these moments. He wanted to have you to create an event where you come in and showcase your fitness and then maybe improve on those particular things as well. And just speaking about Dave for a second, Dave and I go way back. I've known Dave for over 10 years. And it's crazy to see us, very few people kind of stay in the industry, especially on the fitness side, for that long. But I used to race with him at Spartan when he was an early Spartan pro. We built so much of the technology infrastructure behind Spartan Race. That's when I got to know him. And then he moves down here. I moved down here. And yeah, we've got to get some workouts in together. But he's built a really good product with his studio, Elevate, here in DC.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next story, and which is the wellness e- wellness economy report. I don't know where this came from. I got an email and I pinged it over to you, Mo. It's called the Global Wellness Economy Report, and it provides data from 2019 to 2022. I believe, yeah, it's in partnership with NASM, and a very interesting report. As I said, I have no idea how they got hold of me, but I downloaded it. It's pretty comprehensive. I guess one of the things that I found out from this specific report is how they define the wellness economy, and according to this publication, it's a combination of physical, mental, emotional, social, and environmental, and they basically track those, and I think the outcome of the result is that the US is the number one wellness economy in the world. Thoughts
Well,
on that?
I'm really proud, want to see that us all being in the US. Matthew, you're not technically American, but we've embraced you as being
I won't
American
admit
here.
to that. Okay.
Yeah. But look, I think one with Brian and I, here's another fun fact. Arlington, Virginia, and Brian, you probably know this, for the
I
sixth year in a
do.
row, is the fittest city in America. The second fittest city in America is Washington, D.C. So we are able to firsthand experience the benefits of the investment that both public and private sectors make. I live, a couple of blocks down from an incredible trail network. I live less than a mile from solidcore and several other boutique studios, so many healthy food options in the area. All of this plays an important role in building an ecosystem. Ultimately, that's what we need, right? We need to be, when we're going to touch on something here coming up next, but we need to be surrounded by good community, good people, a healthy environment. All of those things matter. The US, as which is part of the reason I think why my parents moved here in 1991 from Dubai, has been leading in so many sectors, right? Some bad, where we pollute the most in the world, but so many good. We've led in healthcare, we've led in technology, we've led in defense, and now we're leading in wellness, which is a relatively new category. But I think it's this entrepreneurship, this innovation culture that we have, and also the support of both the private and the public sectors that's helped us create a very healthy environment. Doesn't mean that we're the healthiest country in the world. I don't think that that's what this report states in terms of ranking, but we certainly spend the most as a share of our wallet than anyone else in the world. And I think hopefully that's going to amount to a healthier society.
That's the piece, Mo, that I think I ended up scratching my head about as I digested this report, right? Because at first I had this moment similar to you, like this moment of pride. It's incredible that we, as a country and as a population and public sector and private sector, are coming together and spending. And I really, like, I downloaded the full report and went through sort of page by page and all of the stats. But then I started actually reflecting on the fact that, and I pulled the stat, like, according to some organizations that are out there, you know, the US ranks number 34th in the world from a life expectancy perspective.
Mhm. That's right.
We
Wow.
also know that we have pretty less than positive health outcomes as they relate to things like obesity, hypertension, cholesterol, etc., relative to the rest of the world. And so then I started to ask myself, and I don't know the answer to this, by the way, but I started to ask myself, like, what is the disconnect? What is the disconnect between the fact that, from an economy perspective, we are spending a disproportionate amount? I think when I started to do the math, it was like $5.6 billion that they talk about in that report in the wellness economy. America was like 1.7 of it, right? So like 30% of the wellness economy is in this country. And yet we still are not living longer. We still are disproportionately on pharmaceuticals. We still like, it's kind of crazy to me. And I think it's a moment for us as an industry to think about how do we really start to shift the tide and get to better outcomes that help actually translate that number one spend into things that allow us to live healthier longer.
It was interesting because physical activity was actually one of the highest. If you look at, I don't know whether we can pull the report up again, but if you look at it, it was physical activity was actually one of the highest markers on the report. And I was like you, Brian. I kind of thought about it in two ways. One, it's great that it's they're number one in the world, but also knowing some of the information behind it, it's like not necessarily reflective of the general population either, in terms of them being pretty sick and unhealthy, and predominantly big percentage overweight. And I kind of wonder what's behind that. Is it the more that gets invested in these ideas, the more people think there's a miracle treatment, drug, therapy, trainer that you can just pay and buy your way out of it, or and almost like a denial of the work that needs to be done, which I don't know what was there, but there definitely seemed to be a kind of very contrasting views of what it said and reality.
I think one thing that I always say, like, I wouldn't wish the pandemic on my worst enemy, but I do think one of the good things that came out of the pandemic was a shift in sort of more, I think, top of mind recognition that health is wealth. And so my hope, similar to what you were sort of saying toward the end, Mo, around this topic, is my hope is that as we continue to invest as a country and an economy in this way, and as health being wealth kind of stays top of mind post pandemic, my hope is that these two things do start to converge, where you start to see outcomes and investment start to actually align.
We actually have a related article here, which I want to pull up here in a few seconds. But back to your point about life expectancy, Hong Kong is number one at 85.83. And then the US, going down to the bottom here, is 47th at 79.74. I mean, that's a pretty significant drop from, I mean, think about, we spend the most, but we're number 47 in the world for life expectancy is pretty alarming. But this might be a good time to transition into this other article, which dropped on the New York Times over the weekend. I think was very triggering for a lot of people. And it was called "Let Them Eat Everything." In the age of Ozempic, fat activist Virginia Soul Smith is inspiring and infuriating her followers. And we just kind of talked about how much we spend on wellness, right? I'm sure if we broke it down, GLP-1 in 2023 was certainly up there as one of the biggest spends in wellness as a prescriptive product. What I think, and again, I have no facts to prove this, purely an opinion, is that just like an income gap, there is a health gap. And Brian, I know you spend a lot of time on inclusivity and DEI work that you're doing both locally and nationally. But there is a point where you just don't believe you could do that, that you could be that person, that you could get out of the area that you live in or the neighborhood, that you kind of feel hopeless for yourself. And I wonder, reading this article here on the Times, we'll get into it here, is when you are so far removed and you look at these perfect bodies, you look at these perfect adults, these perfect children, you're like, well, I'm here. There is no way I can go from where I am to where they are. So I'm just going to accept the state that I'm in and continue to live my life as it is. And I just wonder from your perspective, yeah, what role do you think that this mental and emotional weight plays?
I think the mental and emotional weight is huge. And I think there's a lot of shame and shaming associated with body type, body size, weight. And I think what we find is people sort of go into a little bit of a shame spiral, or can go into a bit of a shame spiral, where to your point, they feel like I'm always going to feel this way. I'm always going to look this way. Or I'm going to rebel against the idea that I need to change because I don't want to feel shame for who I am and how I look. And so I think it's a really, really interesting sort of situation that we find ourselves in as a society, because, you know, at the end of the day, you could almost argue that, like, calories in, calories out, it's not that hard, right? Like the equation is not that hard. And I think the thing that ultimately makes it really, really challenging is everything else. It's all the mental, it's all the emotional, it's all the, lowercase t trauma that's associated with how we might have been raised and what we might have observed from our parents and friends and all those things that sort of become the barriers for sometimes making some of those, quote, healthier choices.
I think it's difficult because, like, obviously, once you're a certain age, a lot of these habits and influences are ingrained, and it's a lot more difficult. One of the things I think there's an opportunity is with the kids, because it's just going out. I've traveled quite a lot over the last 2 or 3 months already, both with and without the family, and the amount of pressure to the an unhealthy lifestyle is seen as a treat. It's seen as normal, whether that's like, food or activities or non-activities. It's almost like it must be difficult to be a kid, and fit to a healthy lifestyle, because there's so much pressure not to fit into that. Not moving, eating bad foods is very, very basic, but that's almost like encouraged. That's part of the culture and the lifestyle, and everything's geared around that, whether it's sports and games and you name it. Whereas just going back to, probably, I'm older than both of you, my guess is, but when you was a kid, you sort of didn't have that pressure, like just getting. I'm going to sound like really bad, but going out and getting sweets, like, you didn't. A lot of families didn't even have money to go to the shop, so you didn't get sweets because your parents just didn't buy you sweets or sugary drinks, and they used to want to get you out the house, so you'd be on your bike and you'd run loose for a day, and just, even if you was not necessarily genetically great, you would struggle to get to that size because your lifestyle wasn't supportive of it. And I just wonder now, like, everyone's in cars. We didn't even used to get taken to school. You'd have to walk to school. And I think it must be difficult at that age to grow up in, without some of that. And I just wonder, if there's more that we need to be doing at a younger age to sort of help create more healthier adults.
I think the thing on that I would also layer in, I fully agree with you that it is challenging to be a kid in sort of today's environment. I would also layer in and say I think it's challenging to be a parent in today's environment. So I'm a relatively new parent. My son is almost 2 years old, and one of the realest quotes that I've ever read is, "You will truly unlock your parenting style when you recognize that your parenting style is fully predicated on trying to correct what you perceived as your parents' wrongs when they parented you." And so, while I agree with you, Matthew, that the world has changed in many ways, I think we, as this generation of parents, are also trying to not do the things that we observed when we were growing up, right? When everyone's talking about Atkins and counting carbs and counting calories and you can't have this and restriction. And so I think we're trying to pull our children away from that and remove some of the shame associated with food and body image and how you look and what everyone else is doing and eating and whatever. And I think it's like, how do you find that balance where you're trying to teach your kids healthy habits and make sure that they are set up for long-term health and longevity, while also not sort of parting some of those what can be perceived or what can be experienced as kind of like toxic diet culture traits that some of us grew up experiencing as kids. So I think being a parent is equally hard.
No, it is really hard, and when you even look, I think there's some root causes here. One could be social media and access to just things, right? If you think about even like magazines, we had to go and dig magazines and look for those adult magazines before it wasn't readily available online. And now you're seeing life, you're seeing other people that you might role model. That's number one. Second, it's this idea of like, as we progress as a society and we get more advanced and we get more open, you want to be open. You want to give your kids optionality and choice and freedom to make a decision on religion, on sex, on culture, and all these other things. At the same time, you want to raise them with a set of values, understanding you got to respect society. Being free doesn't mean that you could throw trash down the street. Like, I walked the dog this morning, I saw some trash in my neighborhood, I picked it up. It wasn't my house, I still picked it up. There is social responsibility and social norms, which are also, by the way, evolving. So it makes the job as a parent really, really difficult. However, I think that there are things that we can all agree on as being right and wrong. And as humans, we have a conscience, right? The conscience might evolve, but there are certain decisions. And in this article, to hear, the person who's being interviewed talk about giving her kids unlimited Oreos, and she would rather, spend time with them than feed them broccoli. Well, I say no to that. I think you can have both. I think you can feed them broccoli and have a conversation with your kids about the benefits of being a responsive in being a responsible adult in society, in this global economy, this global world that we live in. This is the easy way out. And if people want to go back and say, I want to be comfortable, well, just let me be happy. What is that teaching our children? What is that teaching ourselves? Because as humans, we aren't meant to be comfortable, because if we were, we'd be sitting on the couch eating our Oreos and watching Netflix. And that's what some people do. As humans, we are meant to move. We're meant to be active. We're meant to search for our food. I don't mean to get primal about this, but we've really built our world around creature comforts. And as we spend more and we advance as a society, we not only consume more energy, but just that feeling of needing to be comfortable also gets more. So we constantly, I think, have to battle against that.
Yeah, where I will agree with you, Mo, is I do think that we cannot, as parents, say it is completely up to our kids to decide. We know that their brains and their executive function and reasoning are not as developed as they will be when you fast forward 10 years. And so our role as parents is to help provide guardrails so
Yeah.
that they can make decisions that, even though today might feel right to them, when they fast forward 10 years and they look back, they're gonna be like, wait, why did my parent allow me to make that decision? That was
That's right.
clearly the wrong, right? Like that is
Yeah.
our role. And so I fully agree with you. We got to create those guardrails around our kids to make sure that, that they are sort of hopefully heading down a path that leads them to live a healthy, long, enjoyable life.
Yeah. Well, we had two more stories which we're not going to fit in, and I think we could have gone a lot deeper on that subject. That's for sure. It's a very very interesting one that leads in all kinds of different directions. So I think we're going to have to wrap this one up, aren't we, Mo?
I think we are. I just, want to wrap up with a final thought on this week's episode. I agree with you, Matthew and Brian. We could have gone on this one for probably a good hour just on that one topic alone. But I think what's been top of mind for me, I mean, coming out of FIBO, being in New York, and seeing some really good brands that we worked with last week, and being triggered by this article in the New York Times. Wellness, to your point, Brian, post pandemic, if there is one silver lining, is at the forefront. It is having its moments. And I think it's only going to get bigger from here. We are bringing more people into the fold, and we're being more inclusive, less exclusive. Optionality is greater than it's ever been before. There's never been a more exciting time for us to be in the industry, either as people working in the industry or being a participant in the industry. So I'm really excited for what is to come of wellness in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, and my takeaway, I think as soon as I got that report, I read to the part which defined wellness, and I think this conversation and many of these similar types of sensitive conversations that we have and create division amongst people. I think one of the things that's kind of you could relate it to the spiritual side, the emotional and the mental is I think we need to be a lot more conscious of things. I think, I sense that as a world, certainly as I've got older and had kids as well, even moved to America, really, I can't help thinking that a lot of us, as society, have lost consciousness that a lot of things we do are because we've already done them. A lot of the advice we follow is because it's always been trustworthy, and a lot of the habits and things that we create are just automatic. And I think when you have a conversation, a conscious conversation, and you really think about it, I think in a lot of cases we all know a lot of this stuff to be true. We just sort of automatically react to things because they trigger something in us. And I think if we were conscious and had a lot more open and conscious conversations, I think we'd find that we all agree on a lot more things, what it seems as though we do agree on if you read the news. That's Brian. Any takeaways from you before we say goodbye?
Look, I think my biggest takeaway is, this idea that, and it's echoing a little bit of what Mo said, but I think this idea that wealth is health and health is wealth. And, the fact that we are investing in it as a country and a society, I think speaks to hopefully where our country and our society are heading, as opposed to where we've been, which has been, 47th on the list, which has been, pharmaceutical laden to help with things like hypertension and cholesterol and all that stuff. And that we really start to invest in ourselves and hopefully living a healthier, longer life. So,
well, Bryan, thank you very much for joining us today. Mo, thank you. To anyone that's listening, we hope you got something out of the conversation. And if you did, it would really help us if you could like and share it with someone else so that we can get this out to more people and continue to have deep and meaningful conversations, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again, Bryan, for coming on.
Thank you both for having me.
Thanks for listening.